David Smith here with one more flipped classroom math lesson. 3 tips before we start. First, remember that you can adjust the playback speed faster or slower as you desire. Second, you can pause the video at any point to jot down some notes or write down some questions for our next class. Lastly, you could turn on the captions so you can read my words go by on the screen. Today's topic, problem solving with trigonometry. So this is typically the toughest lesson in this particular chapter because then you have to use your trigonometric knowledge and skills to solve problems that are more kind of like out there in the real world. And so there are critical thinking steps that are unique to each problem. So there's no one method that would solve all of the word problems that you're going to see. So I'm going to do one here and give you a taste for what it's like. The book provides you with 7 or 8 different problems. They usually give you the diagram, so that part's done for you. I'm not giving you the diagram on this one. I'm going to show you how to generate that diagram from the picture. So let's take a look, or from the words. An isosceles triangle shaped house has base angles of 70 and 12-meter long walls. And here's the question, how wide is the house? How tall? So first off, let's review an isosceles triangle. An isosceles triangle looks like this. It's got 2 equal sides, and the angles opposite them are also equal. That's the definition of an isosceles triangle. So let's take a look and make a diagram of this picture, of this situation. Let's draw our house. It's an isosceles triangle shaped house, and this side equals that side, and that angle is what? 70 degrees. And we know that they're both 70 because from here they're equal. So these 2 angles are 70, and we need to know this distance. How wide is the house? Let's call that width. Now, before we can answer this, this is not a right triangle, right? So you might be going, oh, how do I use trigonometry? It's not a right triangle. And you can't use SOHCAHTOA trigonometry unless it's a right triangle. But there's one thing we can do here, and you've got to be alert for this. In the diagrams, you might need to add a line or 2 that help you see what you need so you can solve the problem. So if I drop a vertical down from the top to the base, that's a 90-degree angle. That's going to cut the base exactly in half. So this little piece equals that little piece. And suddenly, let's label those x. So they're equal. Now I have 2 right triangles. I have this one here, that's half of our isosceles triangle, and I have this one here. Okay? So now I can use SOHCAHTOA to find out some information. So I need this width of the base. That's how wide is the house. So the way to do that is to figure out what one of these little x's is and then multiply it by 2. Okay, the piece of information that I didn't label on my diagram is 12-meter long walls. So these are my walls. So these are each 12 meters. 12 meters. So now I can use this triangle that we identified, this right triangle, with a 70-degree angle, a 12-meter side, to find out what that side is. So we do our usual thing with trigonometry. I'm in this angle. I look out at my little right triangle, and I realize that I have the hypotenuse, and I want the adjacent side. Okay? So that's adjacent and hypotenuse. That's cosine. So that lets me write this equation. Cosine 70 equals, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, the ca from SOHCAHTOA. So it's adjacent, that's x, over hypotenuse, which is 12. The variable's up high, so I multiply the 12 times the cosine 70. 12 times cos 70 equals x. Pull out my calculator. 12 times 70 cosine equals 4.1. So x is 4.1. Now I'm not done. My width is twice x. So this whole distance is going to be 8.2. So WIDTH equals 8.2 meters. Okay? So that's the first question. How wide is the house? Now we're being asked, how tall is the house? So stare at that diagram for a minute. That line is already there. The height of the house is already there. What is that? I'm going to label it with an H right there. So that's this line here. Again, part of this right triangle, which is embedded in the bigger isosceles triangle. So now I can use SOHCAHTOA again to figure out what my H is. So let's take a look. I'm at 70, same angle. Now I'm looking out in this same triangle, but instead of looking for X, I'm looking for H. So H is opposite of the 70, and then I still have the hypotenuse. So now I'm dealing with opposite and hypotenuse. That's the SO from SOHCAHTOA. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So now I can write another equation. Sine 70 equals opposite, which in this case is H, over hypotenuse, which is 12. Same deal here. The variable's up high, so I multiply the base times this side. So I get 12 times sine 70 equals H. Pull out my calculator. 12 times 70 sine equals 11.2. So H, which is the height, equals 11.2. Now let's do a reasonableness check on our answer just to make sure it makes sense. With a 70-degree angle, these are pretty steep. It's not like a 30-degree angle, which would make it like that. It's pretty steep, so that means this has got to be tall. So 12, okay, that's our tall. Then our base certainly shouldn't be bigger than 12, probably smaller. Certainly looks that way in the diagram, and yes, indeed, 8.2 seems to be about right. Now, if this length is 12, this H, it looks pretty tall also, just a little shorter than 12, and guess what? 11.2, which is indeed a little shorter than 12. So, for the problems you're going to see in this exercise set, there's all kinds of different ones. And they're going to ask you about rhombuses, parallelograms, squares, other geometrical figures that you've probably been introduced to before, but might not remember their characteristics. So you might have to go on the internet and look those up. But once you have the information, you can mark your diagram, figure out what your knowns are, and then use your trigonometry to solve for what you're being asked to find. Now that you've watched the video, jot down some notes, some questions, or a quick summary of the lesson. You can also re-watch the portions of the video that challenged you the first time. If you enjoyed the video, please click like. If you'd like to help me grow my YouTube channel, please click subscribe.